Hi everyone, it's Andy with True Blue Quilts, and I am here on a Saturday just to pop in and say hello, talk a little bit about what I'm working on, and it's November 10th, so I thought I would share 10 things that are near my sewing machine. This is a total knockoff on a friend's idea over at Gigi Made It. She is a knitter, and every Saturday she asks 10 questions. Well, I don't have 10 questions for you, but I thought that sharing 10 things that are just here in my sewing room would be a good place to start. So one of the first things that's near my sewing machine is the design wall that you see behind me. Now I have gone very low tech with this design wall. As you can see up at the top, there are just thumbtacks attaching a piece of batting to my wall. Yes, I did check with my husband first because he is the handyman that would have to get this room ready to sell if we ever decide to move, and so I made sure it was okay to put holes in the wall. So you'll want to check with the other people you share the space with before you make any changes like that. But yes, it works just fine to have a piece of batting with some thumbtacks attached to the wall. And I've got my shop banner here that is a small quilt, and it hangs there just fine. So the batting will work unless you want to cover some other drywall pieces or some other pieces of wood or something that would be a more permanent layer there. Some people have used foam insulation to put the batting on top of, and then they attach that to the wall so they've got a bigger, stronger surface, more durable. But this has lasted me for several years, so I can recommend that. Some of the other basic tools that I keep near my sewing machine are thread. I am an Aurifil fan, so it uses less, or it produces less lint when I am sewing. So I tend to stick with Aurifil, and if you don't know the little trick, you can pop off the end caps of your thread, and I do this because it feeds through my machine easier when the spool is low. So I noticed that with the end cap on the spool of thread, I would get down to the very last little bit of thread and it would stop. It wouldn't feed over the my bobbin holder on my machine. And so if I take those end caps off, I can use that spool on my machine a little bit longer. And these glasses, the glare there is bothering me, so I'll just take those off. So I'm up to item number 3 of my 10 things I keep near my sewing machine, and every good sewist knows they need their seam ripper. So unfortunate that you have to depend on that so often, but we always joke in this house that it's not a project until something goes wrong. So you have to rip back, so keep that seam ripper handy. And I've got my pretty classic model there, just a plastic blue handle there, but that sits right next to my sewing machine and gets used quite often. Let's see, another basic tool that you need is your scissors, and I've got a nice Dover pair. I can't remember the brand name of these, but pretty gold handles there, and these are about a 5-inch pair. I have a smaller embroidery snips that I will keep near or in a project bag or near my machine. Yes, my machine does have one of those little thread cutters on the edge, but I prefer to have a full pair of scissors to just cut my blocks when I'm chain piecing, or if I need to cut off an edge of a length of fabric that was too long, I can do that. So, and yes, these came in a fancy leather holder, so I try to keep that nearby and keep those because we don't want to damage our scissors if they fall on the floor. And yes, I have knocked those off my sewing table, so I want to keep those handy. So near my sewing machine, I have number 1, my design wall, number 2, my thread, number 3, my seam ripper, number 4, my scissors, and then number 5, my pins. And I have one of those handy magnet pin holder, and these are my favorite type of pins. Let me get to a background that you can see that. The glass head silk pins, so they're pretty thin and sharp, and I've just got all those yellow tip pins, and the alternate color in the package when I bought it was this light blue that sometimes gets lost in my fabric, but I've got probably 1.5 boxes there all grouped together, and my one lone flower head pin that's a little bit longer than the others there from some project. But yeah, those are just nice and magnetic there on that pin holder, and I keep that by my machine. I can just kind of slide those pins out and drop them right on the magnet and not worry about pins getting lost or dropped on the floor. So that is item number 5 of the 10 things I keep near my sewing machine. Item number 6, I keep a screwdriver handy. I have this short model that came in a kit of some kind of fix-it kit. I also have one of the little eyeglass repair kit screwdrivers that has a flat head and also the Phillips. I reach for this every time I wind bobbins, because the way and that leads right into item number 7 is my Bobbin Keeper. And you see here, I use a neutral color thread for most of my piecing, and I've got several full here, and I've got a couple that are empty. When I empty 4 or 5 bobbins, I do one big bobbin winding session, so that if I run out during a sewing marathon, I can just reach for the next full bobbin and then stop and refill 5 at a time. When I wind my bobbins, grab my handy screwdriver and open up the bed of my machine so I can clean out the lint. It's very important to keep your machine in good working order, and cleaning out the lint is a important step in doing that. And so if you do that regularly, your machine will run for a long time. I've got a very basic sewing machine that I do straight stitch most of the time on, occasionally do a zigzag, but no applique. I'm not an applique person. So this is just kind of a straight stitch quilting straight rows type of machine, and it has served me so faithfully and well for many years. I have never had to, I'm knocking on wood, I have never had to take it into the shop for any service. Just keep the lint cleaned out of it, and that's about it. So I am really in love with my basic model Janome. Shout out to that brand of sewing machine. They have served me well. So the screwdriver and the bobbin holder were items number 6 and 7 on my list of 10 things I keep near my sewing machine. And the next one is, I'm sure we can all relate to, the box of scraps. So I've just got bits and pieces of all sorts of projects here. And as I said, I like to chain piece, and so I need a leader ender. I follow Bonnie Hunter's blog, and she always talks about leader ender projects. In fact, she does annual projects of what kind of leader ender blocks can we make this year in between our other quilt projects. So I just grab some of my scraps and make kind of wonky log cabin things, and just random pairs of fabric, and I'll sew those together and make crazy blocks, which can be turned into pet beds and donated to a charity or some other kid's quilt or somebody that doesn't mind wild and crazy scrappiness. So I've got my box of scraps there as item number 8. And item number 9, a journal, sketchbook that I just make notes of different quilts and patterns and things I want to try. So it's always handy to keep a notebook, paper, pencil nearby your sewing machine, your quilting time. Jot some notes if you need to, you know, if you get a phone call, have to take a message while you're quilting. But I like to draft my own patterns. Obviously, as a quilt designer, I'm working from my own notes a lot. So I have my handy notebook as item number 9 next to my sewing machine. So that brings us to the last item on my list of 10 things I keep near my sewing machine, and that is my next project. So here is a block that I've done in some Allison glass fabric, and I've used my angle play rulers, angle play templates to make my right triangles there, and this block is going in a new pattern. So I always try to keep a new project, a second project nearby while I am sewing. So that kind of piles up near my sewing machine. So I've got my tools and I've got some other sewing projects going on my design wall here for 10 things that I keep near my sewing machine. Thanks so much for tuning in, and if you'd like to take a look at my quilting services or the patterns that I have for sale, head on over to truebluequilts.com, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. I'm Andy Stanfield.